Hello, my name is Svitlana Iotko, and you are watching MISI Community Solutions podcast. Today we will be talking about fraud, your rights and responsibilities. We'll try to teach you how to avoid fraud in your everyday life in the United States. We have Galina Dorris with us today. Hi, Galina, and please introduce yourself.
Hello, Svitlana. It's a pleasure to be here today. Like you stated, Galina Dorris. I'm a law graduate at Equal Justice Law Group. I have my Juris Doctorate, which means I have completed law school here in the United States. I have my master's in public health that addresses all state and national policies. And I'm currently working in the areas of law that include civil procedures and civil law and immigration. Civil law is the law that would be covering fraud, and unfortunately, we do have a lot of cases of fraud.
So, what is fraud and how to avoid it?
So there's a lot of different types of fraud, but overall, there are elements of fraud. And one of the most important elements of fraud is that someone is trying to deceive you, misrepresent information to you, knowing that this information is incorrect from the very beginning. So basically, you're not playing on the even fields, right? Because another person, another party knows that you don't know something, or they're a meeting not telling you some information, knowing that this information is absolutely material for you to make a decision. So we need the elements of intent, which is knowledge, misrepresentation of material information. But now let's scratch all the legal elements and just have an example, right? Just basic example. Let's say you would like to purchase lipstick from me, and you're asking for red lipstick that will stay on all night. I'm selling you told me that you want a red lipstick that will stay on all night. I'm selling you my lipstick that I know will not stay on all night, and it's just a cheap lipstick from Walmart. So I'm selling you this with knowledge that I know this will not deliver as to what you requested. I have intent, right, to defraud you because I'm looking just to get that cash from you right now. And it is material because you specifically asked for this specific type of lipstick, right? So it is a material information that I deceived, that I didn't provide you correct information right here. So it's a very, very simple example.
Yeah, very good example to understand what is fraud and how can we meet fraud in our lives.
Sure, I'll give various examples. A lot of times, immigration clients will come through our doors with rejection notices from USCIS that will say that there is a denial, let's say, of green card or visa application because USCIS thinks you committed fraud. So when I start the investigation, I find out that sometimes my client misspelled their name or a very important entry, the date of entry to United States. Now, USCIS Immigration Services will treat the situation as fraud because they will think that you intentionally, knowing that the date is different date, right, or the spelling of your name is different, provided this information, and this information material, right, it is, all of it is material, very important information to adjudicate your status, right, to get you that green card. So that's one prime example I can give you just from immigration, and then I have to go back and carefully examine and understand what happened with my client. A lot of times they just did not see it. They did not see that their misspelling of their name or date of birth of their parents was incorrect, right? So that's why it's important that you review every single application, because guess what? At the end of the day, you are liable for it, not your attorney. You're liable for it. When you sign an immigration application, you have to put your signature on it that certifies that everything you stated in there is absolute truth and correct, and you reviewed this information. Or same within the immigration field, I recently had a client, amazing man, decided to fill out application for his mom for a green card. And for some reason, he decided to put old address where she's not residing anymore just because that's the address that they're using. and also stated that she's still married to her spouse, even though they were divorced for 15 years, because he said, well, legally they're divorced, but we're still, operating as one family, and I did not want to complicate their situation with immigration, and I wanted the old documents to be sent to the same location. Such situation is really hard to overcome because I need to show, technically there was intent because that person did not want to give the new address because they wanted it to make things more simple, right, in terms of paperwork, because all paperwork was going to that address. And they did not want to indicate that parents are divorced because they're technically operating as one family, right? But there is intent. I had to overcome that part. And it is material because USCIS reviews this as that you're trying to hide, avoid, and omit the information from USCIS to probably seek some immigration benefits. Even though I knew my client is absolutely innocent, he just did not get consultation. He went on ChatGPT and just prepared the form himself, right? And ChatGPT answered things for him. But that's one of the situations, that I encounter, very difficult situation. Now we have to take his case on appeal and fight, the allegations of fraud that were brought forward by USCIS, federal government, against him and his mother. So that's immigration. Let's talk about the other types of fraud that I see. So often, especially within our community, is definitely construction. There could be, again, contractual relationship. Let's say that you were hired, your tile constructor, right? You have your little tile business that you're placing tile in homes, right, and so on. And let's say your contract was not valid, right, or there's some issues with your contract, and now the landlord or the owner of the house might bring fraud charges against, not charges, fraud lawsuit against you, stating that you omitted some information. You didn't provide some detailed information about tile that you were delivering. I had a situation like this where a very expensive piece of tile was delivered from, I do not remember, from somewhere in Europe or Middle Eastern, very, very expensive.
Maybe Italy or France.
Something like that. And then it did not satisfy, the preferences of the owner of the house. And the contract was not a good contract, unfortunately, for my client. And there were some issues with the contract. And now owner was alleging fraud against my client. And I had to overcome that. So I see this a lot in construction. So you have to be very careful, and you have to really have good contract that outlines what exactly you're promising to the owner of the house. Otherwise, they can allege fraud and say that you omitted some information, or you knew that there's going to be issues and you didn't come forward, right, to provide the information on time. So very important to understand between, both parties, what is it that you're promising to deliver, okay? Another situations of fraud that we have been seeing, different services. We have a lot of truck drivers. So I have heard of different services like, let's boost your credit, or let's provide you dispatching services for your truck, right?
I heard about credit. Very often people tell you, okay, to buy a house, you need a good credit. So let's boost your credit. So what's wrong with this?
So I'm not saying that you should not do that, or everyone around you are scammers and they will commit fraud and so on, but you have to be really careful. First, remember, have everything in writing. Do have contract. Do not agree. So what do you mean that someone is going to boost your credit and help you with credit? What type of services are they going to be providing? What is it that they're promising you? Are they promising you that your score is going to be boosted by 50 or 60 points? You need to have all of this in contract, right? Otherwise, you don't know what is being promised to you. And then it's really difficult in those situations to bring forward lawsuit with fraud because there's no promises in writing. And both sides don't know what was promised to each other. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing, but it's very important that you're protected and you have everything in writing. Ask specifically what type of services they're going to be providing to you and read those services. A lot of times I see in contracts like this, they will have special clause provisions and very, very small letters that will state that in case if there is a lawsuit, you're not going to be able to sue us in California. You're only going to be able to sue us in Texas or Oklahoma or I don't know. What are you going to do? Fly out there and try to hire an attorney out there? That's going to be very expensive to you. Or there might be arbitration mediation clause, which means you cannot even bring forward your lawsuit in a courtroom before you go through those other provisions that are in contract before you can file your lawsuit. So importance of reading your contract, right?
Yeah, I see how much importance to read, especially the small letters. And you've mentioned about the truck drivers. So what situations with them can happen?
So far, what we have seen is the services. So what I mean is, like, let's say you're solo truck driver and you have a company that is promising you that they will provide, like, they will secure specific shipments for you, right? Or they'll be your dispatchers. Or, all you have to do is just sit at home and they will provide a driver that will drive your truck, right? Will deliver goods and do all the work for you. You just have to pay and you will get this profit, right? Again, in the situation that I'm talking about, unfortunately, there was nothing in writing. So when my client came forward and he was tired of just paying and not seeing any profit, there was nothing in writing that I can bring forward to the court, right, and to say what exactly they promised to you. It was unclear. There was just the general understanding. There was a lot of text messages, but were unclear deliverables as to what exactly they were supposed to provide you. Again, ask a simple question that someone, whenever they're offering you services, let's say, work on your house, right? Or in the beauty salon, they're promising you something, right? No matter where you go, just ask for the services in writing so you know exactly what you're paying for, right? Another very, very important type of fraud I want to mention is definitely real estate. We see this a lot. Again, realtors, right, have to disclose certain information about house when you're purchasing the house, right? So the omission of disclosure, again, of material, meaning very important information about the house, it might constitute fraud. Again, if your realtor knew that there's issues, they knew this house has been on the market for a long time, but they really want you to purchase this house right now, and they're not disclosing information to you, that can also constitute fraud.
So if they didn't know, it would not be a fraud.
Correct. If they didn't know and they did not have any intent to, omit this information for the purpose just to benefit, right, just for you to purchase this house, then no, they're not going to have fraud. You're not going to be able to bring fraud allegations forward.
And how do people prove that it's fraud?
So generally, overall, when we file a lawsuit for fraud, the law says that we have to state as specifically as possible exactly what we think happened on our side of story. So we have to get very detailed. So I ask my clients as to dates and times, every single correspondence they had, what was their understanding, how many times they met with this person, what was promised to them, were there any witnesses, right, that were present there, and so on. Then when the lawsuit starts, right, we start with what's called a discovery process, where we are lawfully able to obtain information like financial information, any internal communications, right, your text messages of the opposing side, your emails, right, maybe your bank statements, and so on. We can get a lot of information about you, where you went to school, and how many times you shop at the specific store, and so on, to see if that will help us to find the truth, right? The true finder into finding if there was a fraud and if we can sustain fraud allegations against you.
Such a complicated process, and I see how much work you probably have when people come to you with this specific problem.
Yes, and it's not, and I think one of the difficulties are for clients, first of all, they're not realizing how much information they'll have to obtain and how difficult it is sometimes to obtain this information. Also, what I hear almost on daily basis is that my client will say, but they are guilty. They know they're guilty. They know they did it, and they told me they did it, and this conversation 7 months ago, and so on. While the opposing side does not have a duty to bring forward anything that does not look good for them. They're not going to bring this forward. They're not going to come forward and say, oh, yes, I needed this information from you, or yes, I should have disclosed this information from you, or this and this happened. They don't have a duty to do that. It's our duty and liability if we have a lawsuit to prove that this did happen to you with, higher probability than not. It's not a criminal court. We don't have to prove beyond reasonable doubt, which is a high standard. It's a little bit, lesser standard than civil procedure. But as you can see, it's very what we call circumstantial, meaning we rely on a lot of pieces of information. The way I can describe it to my client, whenever we have a fraud lawsuit, we have to build a house by bricks. Every single little piece of information will help us to build a house. One brick is not substantial by itself, right? But just bringing all those little bricks together will help us to show potential credibility of the opposing side. Maybe we can get some information that will prove that they're not a reliable person. Maybe they committed fraud before, or they're, committed certain acts that are not, truthful, and credible for a person would not do that. So we'll definitely attack their credibility too, to prove that overall, with all the circumstantial information, right, there is a possibility that they committed fraud against you. So this is a different category that could be both fraud, that means you can bring the civil action against the person that stole your identity, but there could be also criminal charges depending on what value was stolen from you, meaning, was your identity used to open up a credit line and so on. Maybe that will be felony or misdemeanor and so on. In those circumstances, you might have to reach out to district attorney's office and file police report there. I would suggest filing police report regardless. Very important, but I want people to remember that whenever you file police report, or whenever there is a crime like identity theft that happened against you, right? What criminal justice do for you, they'll find that person either guilty or not guilty, right? And that means they can get some jail time, right? They can get some punishment, but they will not return you finances, right? They're not going to compensate. That's what the civil action is for. That's where you're going to go through civil action, civil lawsuit to get reimbursement. For example, to give you a very drastic example, but let's say one of your relatives is killed, and you go through prosecution, right, and there are, charges that are filed, and let's say that person was found guilty or not guilty, and now they're doing jail time or not doing jail time. That will not make it better for you, right? And you might be suffering financially because that's your loved one. Maybe that was, someone like your spouse that was providing you with income and so on. That's where the civil action will bring forward you compensation for wrongful death, right? So same thing with identity theft. It's very important that, when you're seeking justice to criminal justice, which is very, very important, right? And to make sure that there is a punishment, you need to understand that there's no financial compensation, because that's something that civil courts and civil attorneys work with. Identity theft is a huge issue right now. I think we should do a separate podcast now for that. And I have an amazing guest, FBI agent who does speak Russian.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yes, who can speak about that specifically, because she specializes in this type of crimes, and specifically from stories that she shared with me, and she also shared this publicly on podcast. There's a lot of romantic relationship that are promising things, right? Especially both to young generation and to people that are older, right? Friendships too. I know someone from my circle, and I could not believe it. She's someone very prominent and educated woman, that fell for friendship. There was no romantic relationship but friendship, and she transferred a huge sum of money to help out her friend. And a lot of times, the cases that we're seeing is that in those scenarios, they will try to show you that they do have some finances, so you feel more comfortable. They might actually pay something for you, right, to show you that they are financially stable before they ask you to invest a huge amount of money. Now, those are very difficult, and especially if those identity thefts or transfers happened online on social media. Again, we have special forces like FBI that will look into the situation depending on how large is this identity theft, but what sum of money you lost, and what happened to you, and so on. And the sad part is in those situations, especially where people lost, everything, lost their houses, or, there were credit cards that were opened in their names. Sadly, we hear about situations where a victim is now depressed, and I know some situations where they committed suicide because they just could not, apprehend everything that has happened to them. So it's very, very important to be vigilant on, social media. Do not trust anything that sounds good or too good to be true, right? Check with someone else, maybe, never feel pressured into buying anything or signing anything, any contracts and so on. A lot of times we hear something like, oh, you purchase right now, or tomorrow the price is going to go up. Don't do that. Really go home and check, for example, if this website exists, and so on. Again, that's not necessarily my realm of practice right now. I think we would be better off if we bring someone who works in the criminal part of this, who can speak more to it. But don't fall for anything that sounds too good to be true, and be very careful in your communications. Lastly, remember that DMV, IRS will not be sending you text messages. They will send you mail, right? They will send you mail if there's something and there's outstanding balances and so on. Do not, and your banks as well, they're going to send you mail. Do not trust those text messages or phone calls. Some time ago, I remember hearing, because I used to work in criminal justice system, specifically with human trafficking and, like highly organized crimes, drug trafficking and weapon trafficking and so on. And someone told me a long time ago from one of the investigators that those scammers, right, that hunt down specifically victims for identity theft, literally hunt immigrants. A lot of times immigrants are the victims because, they can easily understand that someone is an immigrant and potentially does not understand all the rights, right, that they have in this country just by your name. Right, because you'll have a different spelling of your name than anyone else. So you might be feel, I don't know if this happened to you, happened to me before, where I see high volume of numbers, calling me, and I can testify to you that I'm receiving way less scam calls right now that my last name is Dorris comparing to my previous last name, which was Prozorova. But my mom and my siblings still receive text messages that will say, Galina Prozorova owes us this amount of money and she needs to pay right now, and so on.
Thank you so much for an interesting conversation. Galina Dorris, Equal Justice Law Group representative today at MISI Podcast. Thank you so much again for your time and for helping the immigrants of Sacramento. Please give us like, write a comment, and subscribe. Of course, send this video to the people you know, and watch us next time. Join us next time. I hope we'll have more interesting topics, especially if you're interested in listening or hearing more from Galina. Please write the topics you're interested in, and we'll definitely come back to those topics. My name is Svitlana Iotko, and I wish you not to get a victim of fraud.